Hi everyone, Fredsky here. Welcome back to another video. Today I will talk about the performance in games of GTX 1080 Ti Seahawk that I unboxed in my previous video a week ago. I will look at temperatures and talk a little bit about the noise. So now you can see on your screen is the spec of my PC in which I tested the graphics card. So let's have a look first on Dirt Rally in 4K and how well was the card handling it. Tested it with each resolution, which was 4K, 1440p and 1080p with advanced blending on and off, because I noticed that when advanced blending was on, there was a significant dip in performance. It added some extra little details for the forest and trees, but I didn't really pay attention, but I think it's worth noting as there was a significant change in frames. For my personal gaming, I'm aiming to get 60 frames per second. I play with VSync on. So as you can see in 4K with advanced blending off, I was able to play comfortably in 4K at 60 frames per second. Moving on to 1440p, with or without the advanced blending, I was still way above my 60 frames limit. In 1080p, if you're gaming on a screen that has 100 Hz or more, the card was on average exceeding 100 frames per second. So for temperatures, I used Dirt Rally own benchmark as it allowed me to run it on loop and get the coolant nice and roasty before I took all the measurements with the MSI afterburner. I tested the card with different fan profiles. I set them up in BIOS of the motherboard, and I went at first for the lowest possible setting, which was 30% RPMs, and going under that, it actually didn't stop the fan from turning, so it didn't matter if I went below 30%. And then I increased it by 10 and later on by 20%. So for my personal comfort, 30 to 45% is something that I consider a silent operation. Obviously, you get some noise coming out from my case, from the AIO pump. I have 440 millimeters maglev fans from Corsair, and everything is running at 30% or lower if possible. Between 50 and 60%, there is an increase in the noise level, but because I'm usually playing with headphones on, I would normally not pay that much attention to it, and then anything above 60% is pretty much very loud. At 30%, after a good few passes of benchmark, the card was running at 58 degrees, and then it went all the way down to 37. Now on this chart you can see additional values, which are the values of the core clock. And this is what the card was achieving on its own. This is not an overclocking done by me. So at 30%, and that's when the card was the hottest, the core clock was at 1886. And then with the lower temperature, it would go up all the way to 1924. I'm not sure why it's downclocking like that, because the temperatures are still much lower than the temperatures of Aorus that I had previously. That card was running around 75 degrees. So what was happening is when the benchmark started, the card would go up all the way to 1924 megahertz on core clock, and then after a little while it would scale down to whichever value for the temperature it was running at. I did some overclocking and I was able to increase the core clock and the memory clock by 100 megahertz each. However, again, I noticed that the card would start at the added value, which usually was around 2012 megahertz, and after a while it would settle just under 2000 mark. Anything above 100 hertz would result in system freeze. It wasn't overclocking as well as I was hoping it would. I think I read on Gamers Nexus that some people were able to get over 2000 megahertz on the hybrid cards, but not with this one, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that all the Seahawks are the same, but my particular card wouldn't really go beyond or even stay at 2000 megahertz on core clock. So in Ghost Recon Wildlands. At 4K with VSync off, I struggled to get 60 frames per second. So even going down to high settings did not guarantee me a smooth gameplay. So I needed to tweak my settings a little bit more and then turn the VSync on and hope for the best. So unfortunately, I was unable to test Ghost Recon in any other resolution than 4K. But let's go back to the very beginning. As you can remember, in my previous video, I did an unboxing, an overview, and then installed the car in my computer. When I powered the PC, the fan started to work, the pump started to work, even the little fan on the graphics card itself started to work, but there was no signal coming out through HDMI port or display port to my screen. So I was only able to go into Windows through the graphics card that's in the CPU. So pretty much I was really annoyed at that point and in a bit of a shock and despair, because this was my fourth GTX 1080 Ti. I had two Founders Edition at the beginning, and then the Gigabyte Aorus and the Seahawk, and it just didn't work. That's why I actually didn't include any tests in the first video. My initial thought was to send it back, but I decided to test it first. So thanks to my colleague who had a few different computers, I was able to put it in Z170 motherboard, Z270 motherboard, both with 850 watt power supply. The card wouldn't work. It was same thing again. And then it went into X99 build with 1200 watt power supply, and it worked no problem. I brought it back home, put it in my PC, and same thing happened. So I was really at that point thinking it has to be the motherboard. But on the other hand, I had no issues whatsoever with the previous cards. So my other colleague recommended me to reflash the BIOS of my motherboard, and I used the same BIOS that I actually had, and the card worked. So just to make sure that it was just some weird freak of nature or something wasn't connecting or whatever else, I brought it back again and tested in Z170 and Z270 rigs that previously experienced the same issue, and everything was fine. Unfortunately, I noticed that there's a significant coil whine, and you can listen to it now. There's an issue with Ghost Recon where if I'm changing from 4K resolution, the screen goes dark and the game is being minimized. And then in Dirt Rally, in its benchmark, there's some kind of strange glitch whenever the camera is being changed. So that's pretty much everything I could do with the card. I'm sending it back. It was always my desire to get a hybrid card because I really like the way they look. But I guess I was quite unlucky with this one. I used to have a 1080 Aero from MSI and I had zero problems with that card. So I'm not saying that Seahawk is a bad card or that you should not buy it, but I think I just was really unlucky with this one. That's it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or if you have any suggestions, just let me know in comments, and I'll see you in the next video.